Hi, Movie the Recap here. Today I'm going to tell a story from a film in 2016 called Vanishing Time, A Boy Who Returned. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. At the beginning of the film, a child psychiatrist interviews a little girl named Suren. When the doctor puts up a camera to record the interview, Suren obviously becomes nervous. She requests that she retell her story from the beginning. Suren begins by stating that her mother married Dukhyun some years ago. Her mother died soon after her marriage, and Suren has been living with Dukhyun ever since. He is assigned to a building job on the ruling island of Wano, so the two must transfer. Suren has never been completely happy since her mother's death. She doesn't speak much and dislikes her stepfather. She gets enrolled in a new school on the island, where she will have several opportunities to make new friendships, but she still wants to be alone. Her stepfather is required to work nightly as the superintendent of a tunnel building site. Because of the explosions that occurred during development, the island's residents are not permitted to access the construction area. Suren checks through her phone one night and reads comments on her wormhole blog. Suren managed to escape the world when her mother died, and while looking for methods to do so, she became interested in wormholes, supernatural creatures, and so on. She discusses similar subjects with others on the internet, even on the school computer. She leaves her computer open by accident, allowing her classmates to see her remarks and mock her. Suren meets an orphaned boy named Sungmin on his way home. Sungmin introduces himself and attempts to become friends with Suren, but she dismisses him. Suren overhears Sungmin and his pals discussing her blog on the wormhole over lunch the next day. After reading it, Sungmin claims to have reached another realm. That day, Sungmin follows her as she walks home. When confronted, he declares that he believes what she has written on her blog. The two become friends as a result of their similar curiosity in supernatural phenomena. Suren has constructed her own alphabets in order to speak with Sungmin in private. They start using it on a regular basis to write each other messages in Suren's diary. They travel around town seeking for ghosts every day after school. Sungmin takes Suren on one of these outings to an abandoned wooden house in the forest. They spend a long time exploring the home and talking while sculpting on wax blocks. Suren has begun to fall in love with Sungmin. She unexpectedly kisses him, making him nervous. One day, Suren hears that Sungmin and three of his buddies are going to the construction site to observe the explosions. She joins them as they move into the woods out of sight of the authorities. One of the boys rushes back home after they cross the gate to the place. The other four hide behind a cliff and wait for an explosion, but are disappointed when none occurs. While walking through the jungle, they come across a little cave. They decide to look deeper and walk inside one by one. They eventually come to a light shining object surrounded by water near the cave's end. Suren believes it is a meteoroid. Sungmin decides to dive into the sea and grab the stuff. When the object is taken out of the cave, it stops shining. The boys observe that it resembles an egg. Tae-shik, one of the kids, believes that the egg belongs to a time goblin. On full moon evenings, according to his grandpa, a cave in the mountains appears where the time goblin lives. Whoever enters the cave will come out as an older person. The other boys don't believe him since they haven't aged. Suren notices that her hairpin, a present from her mother, has lost. As the boys guard the egg, she returns to the cave to search for it. She finds her pin, but discovers that the luminous egg has returned to the water. She walks out, confused, to find the egg has broken and her friends are missing. She searches them all around jungle until it gets dark. She actually gets lost in the woods and has to spend the night there. On the next day, an investigation team searches for the children in the woods. Detective An is appointed as the investigation's lead. Soon after, officers discover Suren unconscious in the woods. She is, thankfully, alive and well. In the hospital, the investigator asks her what happened to the other guys, and she tells him everything about the cave and the lightning egg. The investigator and the elders are skeptical about her statement. She even brings them to the jungle to show them the cave, but they are unable to locate it. It's almost as if it vanished after the full moon. The investigator is then notified that the body of one of the missing boys, Jae-wook, has been discovered underground on a beach 20 kilometers distant from town. It is discovered that his death was caused by an asthma attack. Because he had to be buried underground, the case changes from missing person to abduction. The other two guys are still missing weeks after the tragedy. Suren goes back to her older lonely personality in the absence of Sungmin. She, too, is mystified, but no one believes her when she tells the truth. One day, Suren hears a noise outside her house. When she looks around, she notices a man running towards the woods. She follows him into the jungle. After a few minutes of rushing, she collapses, and the man came to a standstill. He approaches her and looks at her in fascination as Surin freezes in shock. For the first time, the guy speaks up, claiming to be Sunmin. Surin breaks down in tears as she hears his name. She ends up in front of Dukhyun's car and quickly informs him about the man. The police are told of the incident and they begin exploring the woods to see man, presuming he is the kidnapper. When Detective On questions Surin about the man, she discloses that he was pretending to be Sunmin. The police did not trace the kidnapper, but they get their hands on Surin's diary in which she and Sunmin left letters for each other. She is surprised to see the pages because they are loaded with Sunmin's notes. Using their code language, he has documented everything that happened when Surin entered into the cave to collect her hairpin. The boys are interested about what's inside the egg, so Sunmin crushes it on the ground without waiting for Surin. It turns out to be empty, much to their disappointment. When Surin does not return for a time, Sunmin goes into the cave and discovers that she is frozen in place. He attempts to talk to her and move her, but she doesn't respond. He then discovers a drop of water floating in midair. When he exits from the cave, he notices that the birds have also frozen in the air. When the boys get in town, they notice that everyone, including their families, has stopped. This makes them understand that time has stopped for everyone except the three of them, allowing them to do anything they desire. They are on top of the world for the first few days. They eat and drink whatever they want, sleep whenever they want, and run about all day. After a month, they become bored and decide to leave the island for another city to test whether they are the only humans on the planet that can move. Their plan is interrupted when they discover that the water in the ocean has likewise stopped flowing, indicating that the boat would sink. Back in the present, Surin recognizes Sunmin as the man who approached her in the woods. She puts down her book, since getting the policeman away from him is her main concern right now. If they discover him, he would certainly be arrested because of kidnapping, so she pretends to have lied about seeing anybody in the jungle. The authorities believe her, and she continues to read her notebook. Many months later, the boys begin to live inside a tent in the mall. Jae-wook's health gets worse by the day since he suffers from asthma, and his inhaler malfunctions. One night, he suffocates and slowly dies in front of his friends. Sunmin and Tae-shik are devastated. With a sorrowful heart, they bury their friend's body under the ground on a nearby beach. After dying, Jae-wook's body also stopped like the others. 5 years pass, yet the world stays unchanged. The boys are now teenagers. Despite living in isolation for so long, they remain hopeful that the world will return to normal one day. Sunmin believes that once they reach the age of 20, their time will be restored. When that happens, they steal a small amount of money from everyone in order to become wealthy. Even when they reach the age of 20, nothing changes. They gradually lose hope and go into the jungle's wooden house. One day, the isolation gets the best of Sunmin. He screams and cries for it all to end. Tae-shik is seeing this from a distance and loses all hope. A few days later, Sunmin observes the moon's appearance is changing, indicating that the world is about to resume. He goes searching for Tae-shik but can't find him. He finds for him all around the island until reaching the last cliff. There, he sees Tae-shik's garment on the ground and realizes that his buddy has died. As a last resort, he jumps behind Tae-shik, but at the very moment the world resumes, he rises up from the water, convinced by the moving nature. Surin goes to the wooden house after reading the journal and finally finds her friend. They decide to share the story to the rest of the world, but they're not sure if anybody will believe them. Meanwhile, CCTV footage shows Sunmin hiding in the woods. They suspect he is the kidnapper. At night, Sunmin visits Surin's room for emotional support. He is afraid of hurting himself to get rid of the sorrow because he has been living alone for so long. The next day, Tae-shik's parents come at the construction site, blaming Dukhyun for their son's disappearance. They assume that the explosion at the site killed their son, and Surin is making up lies to rescue her stepfather. Meanwhile, Surin and Sunmin visit the orphanage where Sunmin used to stay. Surin explains everything to the warden and goes outside to call Sunmin. However, she is immediately dragged away by her father. Sunmin approaches his mother like warden and tells her everything he used to do as a child. She is surprised, but she still does not believe him. Dukhyun locks Surin in her room at night, but Sunmin enters through the back door and free up her. They leave the house to figure out what they should do next. Surin recalls seeing another egg in the cave. She recommends that she use the egg and return as an adult to show the others that Sunmin is not guilty. Sunmin, on the other hand, is against the concept since he understands how terrible it is to live alone. He'd rather be labeled a kidnapper than let her go through what he's been suffering for years. Dukhyun notices his daughter is gone and believes she went to the wooden house after discovering a picture of her and Sunmin on her phone. He arrives late at night, assaults Sunmin, and attempts to take Surin back home. However, Sunmin knocks him unconscious and escapes with her. The The police inspect the wooden home the next day and suspect that the kidnapper is tricking Surin into believing he is Sungmin. The news about Surin's disappearance is on the TV, so the police soon find the two. They are pursued by the police. When Surin brings herself to save Sungmin, she invites him to meet her at the cave before they part ways. Detective On tries to convince Surin that the kidnapper is lying to her, but she refuses to believe him. She runs away to the cave, claiming she needs to use the restroom. She takes out the luminous egg and delivers it to Sungmin, but he refuses to give it back since he doesn't want her to use it. He is about to give himself up and accept responsibility for the deaths of his friends. He escapes into the woods, followed by Surin. At the same time, the cops come and follow. They stop at the end of a cliff. Sungmin is grabbed by an officer who throws Surin down the cliff in the process. The detective rescues Surin but falls down the cliff with her. Sungmin tries to save them, but they both fall back before he can. To save them, Sungmin smashes the egg again and the time stops. When Surin awakens a few seconds later, she is on a beach with the detective. She knows what Sungmin has just done. Although it was only a minute for her, it must have been a decade for Sungmin. She is then returned to her home. She apologizes to her father for all she has done while eating supper and addresses him as dad for the first time. The investigator arrives to ask how they survived the fall. Surin doesn't respond, but he realizes she was speaking the truth the whole time. He advises her to lie to the media and claim that the kidnapper influenced her. This way, the people who are accusing her of killing her friends along with the kidnapper will be proved wrong. Surin is finally done telling to the psychiatrist her story. She is amazed after hearing everything and wants to write a book about it. A few months later, Surin is transferring to a different city for high school. Before leaving, she runs into the psychiatrist who brings her the newly released book. On her way to the boat, Surin sees Sungmin through her car window and runs to meet him but finds no one. But some time later, the two eventually meet on the deck. The film ended with them looking at each other. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on the notification, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.